Oh hey, welcome to another edition of Socrates Explains Everything. My name is Socrates and I like to explain things, but it's pretty hard to explain what's going on in Ukraine. The situation is certainly complex and it's a long, painful story. First of all, it's called Ukraine. The Ukraine is what the Soviet puppet state was called. The Free Democratic country is called Ukraine. And it's amazing how many people, like Leon Panetta, former CIA director, he keeps calling it the Ukraine, which is, good for a conspiracy, that's for sure. If I was a conspiracy person, I'd be all over that. But Russia's had designs on Ukraine forever. They're sort of jealous of its landmass. It's very fertile. I don't know. It's closer to Europe than Russia. It's hard to say, but they've invaded and been horrible to the people of Ukraine many times over long history. So they have a horrible history. It's not good. After the Soviet Union broke up, Ukraine had three leverages over Russia, because with Crimea, the Russian fleet was based there, and the Russian country had to basically give Ukraine lease money for the Russian fleet to stay in Crimea. Ukraine had Ukraine had the largest, or one of the largest, nuclear arsenals after the Soviet Union broke up, because the Soviet Union had housed so many of their nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And to give up those nuclear weapons, because they didn't necessarily want to be a nuclear power, they were willing to give them back to the Russians in exchange for a non-aggression pact that clearly the Russians did not end up honoring. Part of the reason, this whole thing is just insane is that there were treaties signed. The third one is the fact that the oil transfer lines go through Ukraine, and they had to pay. Russia paid significant fees to Ukraine every year for those oil transit fees. That's one of the reasons they built the Nord Stream 1 and now Nord Stream 2 pipelines, is to go around Ukraine and cut them off from valuable funds. And to get rid of these three things, Russia made a deal to get rid of the nuclear weapons. They reneged on that deal, but they made a deal to do it. They invaded Crimea to not have to have the leverage of the warm water port. And the Nord Stream 2 went around the oil transfer fees going through the country. And that doesn't seem to be enough, so they decided to not only had they been invading since, I think, 2014, before Trump, they invaded and took over the eastern section of the country, the Donbass. And purely by saying people were Russian speakers there, and it's a very shared history, so of course there's Russian speakers there. It doesn't mean it's your country. And so they'd already taken a piece off on the East Coast, and why Putin decided to try to invade the entire nation is insane, really. It's militarily difficult. It's a very large country, and they had already stolen a piece of it. You would have thought they would have just tried to consolidate that chunk. Russians are saying that NATO, that Ukrainian advancement into NATO is about a problem, but the fact that they had already put the Donbass region under conflict, under occupation. You can't join NATO if you're under occupation, because an attack on one is an attack on all. So if you're in NATO and your land is invaded, well, then NATO is basically thrust into war. So you can't join NATO while you're under invasion. So the whole Donbass invasion of 2014 pretty much made it impossible for Ukraine to join NATO in the first place. And in the end, what's happened? Russia's pushed Ukraine much closer to the West. Obviously, there's no friendship coming from Russia. There's no safety from Russia. So anyone who's nearby is now much more desperate to be part of the EU and part of NATO. So the entire concept has backfired. It was very poorly thought out, I think. It's possible Putin's gone crazy. Maybe he had COVID and it hurt his brain. I don't know. But they're talking about Sweden and Finland, both of which are seeking closer ties with the West they had been avoiding joining NATO to try to keep Russia a bit happier, but what's the point? Russia's talking about nuclear exchange. Well, that's just game over. Nobody survives a nuclear attack. It's not going to be good for anybody. The world economy will collapse, and the environment's not in a place to have nuclear attacks on it. Although who knows? Maybe it'd be better for the global warming with a bit of nuclear winter. I think it's a horrible thing to contemplate, but I've come to a place where a former stand-up comedian is leading a country heroically, and resistance has been established in Ukraine. The people are just as proud and strong as Russians. A lot of them are Russians, and this is pretty obviously a big mistake on the part of Vladimir Putin. Modern weapons make it very difficult to drive around in a big vehicle. You have to basically be willing to murder everybody. Either with nuclear or the thermobaric weapons, etc. You have to lay the area to waste, and it's got blowback at the very least. So hopefully this will help push the West off fossil fuels, because there's just no reason to be using them. I'd love to see us suck the carbon out of the atmosphere and use that for fuel. I don't know what Russia's possible end game here is besides simply stopping. I feel bad for everybody that's being destroyed in it. It's just capitalism at its worst. Because if capitalism had value, it would somehow be able to stop this or change it or something. Sanctions, kind of help, but capitalism is what empowered this in the first place. These few people with all the money, and then they just think they have all the power. We can do everything we want because we have everything. I don't think it's good for anybody. Anyway, I don't know if that explains anything what's going on in Ukraine, but I'm a stand-up comedian who's sitting in the park at the moment. So I got shows coming up this week. Check it out on Facebook. I don't know what else to say. Good luck to Ukraine. Support them if you can. I don't know how else I can support them. I made a little vlog, so. Russia. The American in Europe. It's not good. It's not good.